The IDW comics have been coming out for a little while now, and I've been doing my best to keep up with them. After receiving a couple of requests, I looked for them online and got myself caught up. So this video will be a mix of my thoughts and initial reactions. I'll also be assuming that most of my audience has already read these comics, so those among you who have not read them may either brace yourselves for some spoilers or exit the video now. With that, let's take a look at what IDW has given us so far. Check out this cover. I haven't even opened the book yet and already I'm having fun. Now this stack of books that Twilight is leaning on is hilarious, and there's a bunch of cool stuff going on in the background to look at as well. However, in a move that I'm not sure what to think about, IDW put out several different covers to the same issues. I suppose I can give them credit for finding a creative way to sell multiple copies of the same book to the same person. This thought gained extra validity with me when I went to Everfree Northwest and Scan 120 showed me that the covers pieced together into a cohesive portrait. That is clever thinking. However, on the consumer side of things, I can imagine avid collectors and collectors on a budget seeing this and going, "Oh, come on!" If it were me making these decisions, there would have been a cheap version of the comic. This would just be the book itself with the cover being one piece of the portrait. Then there would have been another package comic that would have cost an extra $1 or $2, but included a poster of the entire portrait. Opening the book, we're given a brief scene of the Cutie Mark Crusaders attempting to learn zoology. Hilarious puns abound before the animals' eyes turn green and they attack the Cutie Mark Crusaders. Now, remember when I said that the covers each had a lot to look at? I love how that gets turned up to the 10th degree at a few pages in. It's always a good thing when a visual medium like a comic book has a lot going on in its frames. Some of you listening paid pretty good money to read these, so having a lot to look at will give it some reread value, as you'll likely pick up on things that you didn't see on your first read through. That is, unless you're like me and have to spend 10 minutes looking at everything on the page to make sure you've absorbed everything before moving on. So let's see if I found everything of note. We've got Derpy, Firefly, and Snowflake dropping a weight on some poor pony's head, much to the amusement of this pony and to the contempt of Cranky Doodle Donkey. Philomena is molting again, the Blues Brothers, Screwball scaring a cat, an Iron Will poster, foreshadowing, and either foreshadowing or a hungry cat, and possibly someone's original characters. Overall, this arc was a lot of fun. Chrysalis is even more evil than she was in the show between her continued sociopathic tendencies, her long-game plan to take Twilight's powers, and the way she very callously murders things right in front of the Cutie Mark Crusaders. Any scene with Chrysalis and the Cutie Mark Crusaders is drop-dead hilarious. The abominable cave troll, very possibly a Brony parody, and the old-time gangster giant spiders of the second issue had me laughing out loud. And the way the main six got separated and how it played into Chrysalis's plan was genius. The trials they went through were hilarious with the ways that their personalities played off each other, like how Applejack quickly gets bemused with Rarity's constant need for cleanliness and etiquette even when it's the least practical or necessary thing at the moment, or how Pinky's antics without the others to balance her out would only be good in small doses for someone like Rainbow Dash. Then there's the busy backgrounds that I mentioned earlier and the running gags, all of which kept everything interesting, and even the references to popular culture during the 4th issue were hilarious. Now that the good stuff is out of the way, I'd like to discuss some things that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, so be sure to let me know what you think of these points. Firstly, the opening scenes in Ponyville appear to contradict the established canon. Everyone who's read this arc knows that these are the changelings and probably knew so as they were reading it for the first time. So let's take a look at what the changelings were established to be like.
I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. They're changelings, remember? They're changelings, remember?
Instead of spaced expressions, they're shown to be able to perfectly imitate other ponies in appearance and voice. So until they do something out of character, we shouldn't know the difference, which would appear to be the case in the comics until the rest of the main six notice everyone around them being space cases and even adopt the mannerisms themselves as camouflage. Or perhaps it's just a matter of the changelings replacing everyone while setting up to overwhelm the main six with numbers during an ambush. That strategy succeeded in the show after all, so why not use it again? If that's the case, then these scenes can still work. However, another thing that doesn't sit well with the canon is the encyclopedia entry about the changelings. The right side shows a quote-unquote infected pony. The changelings were shown to be able to imitate someone their target loved to feed off them or confuse them in battle. They're essentially a cross between changeling fairies and kelpie, both of European folklore. So I don't know what infected means here. Could it perhaps be a second and previously unexplored power? But later we see that they're still just replacing ponies, so I'm not sure what the point of bringing it up would be. Just 1 or 2 sentences somewhere in there to explain this would have been great. However, the comic disagrees with me and moves right along. So let's take another moment and look at all the hilarious book covers in the library. Rarity's character definitely got amped up a degree or two during the battle in the town hall. I guess it was done for simple comedy, and it does work as such. But the first time reading it, I kept thinking about a Canterlot wedding when Rarity quite literally ponied up and started punching out some changelings. She didn't need motivation or visualization aside from the invasion going on and the fact that the enemy was blocking their way to the elements of harmony. Rarity had no problem forsaking her abhorrence for fighting. But now, Rainbow Dash has to remind her to fight by taking a page out of the script to Adam Sandler's The Water Boy. Then, during the part in the second issue when the changeling spies have sown discord between the main six, I would really like to know what Fluttershy would be saying that the only way we can illustrate her dialogue is with a picture of a skull and dagger. And just look at that facial expression. I don't think I've ever seen anything so angry. Because of that, I have trouble believing that Fluttershy would express herself like this. The panel where she's crying into her tail feels a lot more in character to me for something like this. And now for my favorite part, the moral of the story. The real build-up to the message didn't start until the back half of the fourth issue, but it really ties the story together nonetheless. Chrysalis's motives are worse now than in a Canterlot wedding because she's adding vengeance into the mix. She even confirms a lot of fan theories that she sees love as a tool for food, manipulation, and physical power, rather than a force that true inner strength can be drawn from, which is why she didn't believe Cadence's love for shining armor would be able to give him strength. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario with Chrysalis's character would be if she confuses lust for true love, which happens a frightening amount in our world as well. This notion that love and lust are the same thing and that they can be used to manipulate other people is the only thing I've ever seen cause someone to say something along the lines of, "Love is fickle, love can change." This only applies when you quote-unquote love someone in order to get something that you want from them. Either way, she's learned nothing since getting tossed out of Canterlot and has shown us that she is indeed one of those unrepentant villains that doesn't deserve redemption. The cherry on top of this characterization is that she still monologues. Seriously. You'd think that she would have at least taken that away from her last encounter with Twilight when her monologuing ended up giving them an opportunity to free Cadence and toss the changelings across the horizon. Then, while Twilight is giving Chrysalis the fight of her life, she lays it down almost perfectly. Drawing power from love you have for others, and using their love for you as motivation to continue to be strong is the best possible motivation to have. It will propel you almost indefinitely and holds the most potential for actions that make the world a better place. Since friendship and magic are synonymous in this world and such positive energy fuels magic as a physical power, Twilight can manifest these sentiments and sends Chrysalis packing. This arc gives us some interesting insight into Rarity's character. I had always quietly theorized that part of Rarity's character, perhaps even a source of her generosity, is a fear of being alone or neglected, so it felt pretty cool to have my theory somewhat confirmed. But let's take a moment to explain what we're looking at with this arc. Between her hobbies, mannerisms, and general interaction with society, Rarity doesn't have very much in common with most of her family and friends, excluding her weekly spa dates with Fluttershy. She also lives in Ponyville, despite it being shown that she is more within her element when in Canterlot, the best example of this being the episode Sweet and Elite. Naturally, she doesn't get many opportunities to share her passion and by proxy herself. Instead, she's often adjusting to the behaviors and activities of her family and friends. It's also of note how she's seen on occasion fantasizing about meeting someone with similar values to her and living a romantic life together. Trust the voice of experience when I say that this can only go on for so long before one starts wondering if their appreciation for their friends is mutual, or if they'll ever find love. This, more often than not, will create at the very least a little sense of loneliness. It might cause them to do things like jump at an opportunity to express their love for their friends through what they do best, spend extended periods of time away from home in pursuit of common ground, or fantasize about finding a soulmate. All that being said, someone like this would contend with a serious fear of being forgotten, as it would disregard and toss asunder the entirety of one's generous efforts to show their friends that they are cared for in hopes of being loved in return. Later on, Rarity is seen giving the Nightmare Forces a hard time and not allowing herself to easily be convinced of all these things, but it only takes that little bit of self-doubt for the Nightmares to have something to go on. So with the promise that she'll never be forgotten and unappreciated for helping the Nightmare Forces themselves, Rarity succumbs. The scenes where the main six go into each other's nightmares and pull them out is beautiful to me. That is a demonstration of true friendship when your friends are willing to do whatever it takes to support you through your lowest points. This theme explicitly continues through most of the arc, from the ponies forming a connection without the elements of harmony present in a similar way to what happened in Equestria Girls and demonstrating it on their guard, despite keeping this principle in mind as he refuses to give up in helping his friends. That continued support is what brings Luna to overcome her fears and get back on her feet. Then there's the battle with the Nightmare Forces in Ponyville, which is 10 degrees of epic. We've got Luna squaring off against Nightmare Rarity while the Royal Guard goes hoof to hoof with the Nightmare Infantry. Joining the battle is the great and powerful Trixie and Time Turner. Or should I say Dr. Hoof, since he appears to be holding a sonic screwdriver. Granny Smith reminding me of my own grandmother's is so awesome that it gets Big Macintosh to speak. The cakes are serving up some humble pie, Derpy turns a Nightmare's head into a muffin top, Spitfire turns up the heat and doles out a serious Nightmare rug burn.
Why are you just making puns?
As for Zecora, well, all I can say is that hers is the path they should have known not to cross, because this zebra simply doesn't give a toss and handles these villains like a boss. I don't know about you all, but if I was a part of this group, I'd be a little upset with Tank bonking the Nightmare Ahata Diamond Tiara and taking away my chances to give her a couple of swats. Okay, granted, everyone is happy when she's back to normal, but in the previous panel, it didn't look like Diamond Tiara being inside that monster was about to stop anyone from curb stomping it. Ultimately, the moral is very similar to that of the return of Queen Chrysalis, so I can't say too much here without being redundant. However, it is slightly different in that it shows how fear holds a lot of power. In fact, it's one of the greatest inhibitors to doing what we know is right and the one thing that nobody can protect us from. However, if we have someone to reach out to when we're afraid, then choosing to be courageous becomes much easier, and overcoming that fear is usually not too far behind. This comic demonstrates this principle amazingly. They say that the wise man embraces silence while the fools can be heard for miles. Finding a better demonstration of this principle than Zen and the Art of Gazebo Repair would be a challenge for me. Though there isn't as much to say about this in comparison to the other two arcs, it does a great job of showing just how down-to-earth this Draft Earth pony is as he makes his way through a chaotically partying Ponyville in search of some nails. Though lacking in an overall message like the previous two arcs, it doesn't really need it. Instead, it makes a very fun and complete story out of simple slice of life. The reason there's not as much to say is mainly because it's a simple story and partly because I love everything about this arc. There are the running gags such as Big Macintosh unintentionally charming every girl he bumps into, the fireworks getting set off and Luna's t-shirts, or the way events play into each other like the hardware store being destroyed, photo finishes pictures, and his moves while searching for Lugnut becoming a new dance craze at the hoedown. As always, remember to keep up with the backgrounds. Just like the first scenes of the return of Queen Chrysalis, you'll find some hilarious stuff, like this Celestia sculpture made out of butter. There's also Fleetfoot stalking and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Phillies here. The main six seem to be having an ongoing conversation with their friends about a sunstone of some kind. I'm not sure what that's about. And then there's this thing with Time Turner and Derpy. I don't even know what's going on back there. Can someone please explain that to me? I'm very glad they gave Big Macintosh a variety of expressions to show how he's feeling. His quiet demeanor in the show can make him a little difficult to read whenever he's not hopped up on love poison. It's also a relief that they gave him thought bubbles with real dialogue. If they had kept his internal dialogue the same as his usual speech, it would have been unrealistic from a characterization standpoint. But all in all, he still contains his composure, for the most part, and finds a way to boil his responses down to the simplest possible solutions. However, this story also shows how choosing not to speak up like that can be a disadvantage. For example, when he gets saddled with the Cake Twins, there were multiple points where he could have interrupted Cupcake with, "Sorry, I'm not available right now." But in choosing not to do so, he's carrying the foals and being subjugated to their wrath before he even knows what to do with himself. Here, we've got a hilarious page of Big Mac's trek through the festival, eating like you'd expect someone of his size to eat, chasing a butterfly, trying a trampoline, winning and losing games, and... hold the phone. Accidentally entering a time warp to save Ponyville from mutant apes? Okay, are we talking about Planet of the Apes or humans? Oh, I want to see that. A lot. Well, hopefully we'll get a little bit at the end like they did with Spike fighting the giant cockatrices, right? Unfortunately, the misadventure ends with Big Macintosh finding his nails only to come home to a gazebo that's been destroyed by the Cutie Mark Crusaders fireworks, and we never got to see how Big Macintosh defeated the mutant apes, gosh darn it. Well, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to write a fanfiction about Big Macintosh saving Ponyville from a mob consisting of Greek Spartans, Spanish conquistadors, French musketeers, pirates, ninjas, Yakuza samurai, and Leroy Jenkins, all led by, I don't know, Al Capone. Why, you ask? Because this comic is a tease, that's why. This one looks alright so far. It's not completed yet, so I'm most likely going to need to do a follow-up video on this arc. It's definitely solid as a story, but I'm having trouble believing that Shining Armor was a tabletop gaming fanatic. I know it's possible since I know people like this, but I didn't ever picture Shining Armor to be like that in the first place. So I can't wait until next month when the next issue comes out to hopefully resolve this arc and make this characterization make sense to me. I don't have much to say about the micro-series either. They're all cute, short, simple, and solid stories. However, I believe there's an exception here in Fluttershy's story, so I'll talk about that for a moment. Starting with the good. It was definitely written by someone who had a general understanding of Fluttershy's character and thought to include her full range. I liked how the writer pulled a story out of
Fluttershy's freaky knowledge of sewing.
It capitalizes on Fluttershy's shyness by showing that even though she received some positive reviews on her artwork, a character like that would have trouble hearing anything except the negative ones. It also keeps the continuity that Canterlot High Society seems to have a herd mentality, no pun intended, in that any group for one reason or another adheres to whatever their quote-unquote leader believes. However, where this really fell flat was the pacing. Fluttershy goes from one extreme to the other with an incredibly insufficient amount of transition, if there's any at all to begin with. For example, from realizing that her art isn't liked to going full grand galloping gala and trying to destroy it, in public no less, and then dropping right back to self-confidence and liking her artwork as a medium of self-expression regardless of what others think, all within the span of a few panels, mind you. I don't buy it. Then, its closing message is there, but I wouldn't say it's worded quite right. I believe what the writer intended to convey was that Fluttershy, somehow in that whole mess, learned not to let critiques drag you down. This message has been easily misinterpreted by at least a few people as telling the audience to disregard critiques if they make you feel bad, which would remove most chances one has of improving their artwork. However, the real message here was to not stop expressing yourself due to the fear of being criticized. If they had added a line or two about how to differentiate good and bad criticism and what to do with good and bad criticisms once it's received, that would have made the moral of the story complete, more cohesive, and most importantly, more practical. So those are the IDW comics. They're a lot of fun with a lot to see for a little price and definitely worth checking out if you haven't already. I'm looking forward to the wrap-up of the miniseries with Princess Luna, as well as the continuation of Dragon Slayers and anything else they've got for us. And as always, I'll do my best to put out a follow-up video reviewing those as soon as they come out. If you have a topic you would like to hear discussed, or if you have an episode, fanfiction, product, or anything else you would like to hear reviewed, send me a YouTube message or leave a comment below. You can also drop comments, questions, topic suggestions, and review suggestions by liking Brony Debates on Facebook, following on Twitter, or sending an email to bronydebates@yahoo.com. Have a great day, and I look forward to hearing from all of you soon.